Hey, and welcome to Paint It Black. On this week's episode, I take us through the process of a treaty and what one would look like here in Australia. I hope you're enjoying my channel. Don't forget to subscribe to Paint It Black. Treaty. It's a catchy song from the 1990s that for copyright reasons can't be played in this video. The phrase has become a buzzword and a political movement. But what is a treaty and how would it affect you? According to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, a treaty is an international agreement in written form between two or more states or international organisations and is governed by international law. A treaty gives rise to international legal rights and obligations. In regards to a treaty for First Nations people, it has been called to recognise Indigenous peoples' history and prior occupation of this land. A treaty could also offer a platform for addressing those injustices and to help establish a pathway forward based upon mutual goals rather than ones imposed upon us Indigenous people. Around the world, Indigenous groups have treaty agreements with their colonial governments, such as our neighbours in New Zealand, who signed the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840. Canada and North America have also signed treaty negotiations with their Indigenous peoples. If Australia was ever to allow for one, what would be in our treaty? A treaty could provide, among other things, a symbolic recognition of Indigenous sovereignty and prior occupation of this land, a redefinition and restructuring of the relationship between Indigenous people and wider Australia, better protections of Indigenous rights, a basis for regional self-government, guidelines for local or regional treaties, structures and systems for local and regional decision-making processes. But most importantly, it would recognise that sovereignty was never ceded, meaning that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people never gave up our land. It was stolen from us. Steps have been taken by other states, including Victoria, Northern Territory and South Australia, to establish a treaty with their Aboriginal people. And to be honest, this is probably the best way for a treaty to take place. Former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull essentially rejected a national treaty when he rejected the Uluru Statement from the Heart back in 2017. The Uluru Statement from the Heart is a document created following an intense 6 months of dialogues across the nation. It's essentially an invitation from First Nations peoples issued to the Australian public. The Uluru Statement calls for a First Nations voice to Parliament and a Makarrata Commission to supervise a process of agreement making and truth-telling. These reforms are voice, treaty, truth. But the calls for a treaty in Australia have been around for decades. It wasn't a concern brought up 4 years ago. In 1988, Prime Minister Bob Hawke was presented with the Barunga Statement. This was a declaration of the aspirations of Indigenous owners and occupiers of Australia, and a request to the Australian government and people to recognise our rights. Back then, there was a lot of talk that a treaty could happen.
There shall be a treaty negotiated between the Aboriginal people and the government on behalf of all the people of Australia.
Unfortunately, it was just empty promises. A treaty was never signed. Fast forward 5 years and the Mabo decision was made and the Native Title Act was introduced. But native title is not a treaty, and that's a whole nother episode within itself. So where to from here? Well, here in WA, the McGowan government haven't officially ruled out a treaty with Aboriginal people, but they do rely heavily on native title to please traditional owners. According to the National Native Title Tribunal, 85% of WA is under native title determination. Exclusive native title means that mining companies or anyone trying to dig up the land needs permission from traditional owners to do so. Non-exclusive native title means that Aboriginal people must cooperate with the owners of the land, such as a mining company. But native title isn't good enough. Yothu Yindi said in their song, "This land was never given up. This land was never bought and sold. The planting of the Union Jack never changed our laws at all." Treaty could really change the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It goes beyond just land rights. A treaty could include things such as a voice to Parliament, more equal representation in government departments. It's been 33 years since the Uluru Statement and more than 230 years since colonisation began. How much longer will Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have to wait until we are fully recognised without needing to tick the terms and conditions box? Thanks for watching my video and don't forget to subscribe to my channel.